Hello and welcome to the first official episode of the Hashira Half Hour, the All Demon Slayer All the Time podcast. In today's episode, we will be recapping episode 1, Cruelty, through the lens of, you guessed it, cruelty. My name is Hannah, and I am a little too emotionally attached to Tanjiro. And today I am joined, as always, by my two fellow hosts, Brian.
Tanjiro sleep paralysis demon.
and Emily.
And Emily, it's me. I'm here. I'm excited to talk about Demon Slayer. That's the tweet.
The most sane one here. That's what I would say. Oh my gosh. Well, awesome. Like I said, today we are recapping episode 1, and the theme is cruelty. We also get to see the start of the hero's journey for Tanjiro. So, Emily and Brian, what are your initial thoughts about the episode?
I always have feelings, so I'm always in my feelings, better should I say. It's a heartbreaker, of course. Like, literally, it's, of course, like, very similar anime tropes across the board. Like, 5 minutes in, everyone dies. But, like, also, I mean, that scene, and I feel like the way in which we saw it unfold was really cool. I do think there were a lot of elements of foreshadowing to kind of tell what was going to come. Like when Tanjiro had that flashback to Grandma's memories and stories of demons as he was kind of growing up, I feel like that definitely was like a, hey, like protect yourselves from this in the future, but also like that imminent ending of the episode, right? Where you think, okay, like maybe he finally realizes why Grandma said that. So I feel like that was one of my favorite moments thematically of the episode there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you brought up like the warning of the elder. I mentioned in our intro episode that something that I like to try to bring is like a little bit of a lens of like this storytelling that I've had the chance to like study a little bit throughout my educational career. And so something that I really liked about this episode is the foreshadowing that you mentioned. The whole thing takes place like on the mountain and in the forest, and symbolically the forest in a lot of folklore and fairy tales represents like a liminal space, or a space where your character might go to like undergo a metamorphosis or a change. Nobody's ever going to like enter or leave the forest without something changing within themselves or certainly surrounding them. And so we see Tanjiro going through this brooding and dark forest alone. He has this moment as well when he's getting ready to go back up the mountain at night with the older man. I do not remember if he had a specific name, but the older man, he stays in the cabin and he warns him about the demons. And initially he kind of shrugs this off as like, oh, this is just folklore, like that, like this is just a story that you would make up to keep kids at home at night. But certainly foreshadows something a lot darker and a lot more cruel. So that's something that I really liked.
Yeah, I remember the first time I was watching it with my husband and we were sitting there, and in that first scene where he's like saying goodbye to this loving and adorable family that everyone wants to love, and we're both sitting there going, they're all about to die. Like, as sad as it is, like it just seems so sadly obvious to us. It might just be our experience with anime being horribly sad in the first episode, but it was definitely a moment where you're like, oh no, this isn't going to go well. This is such a sweet family, and this episode's name is Cruelty. So definitely tough, but shout out to my boy Tanjiro. I will always give my boy a shout out for handling that as well as he did. He's 13 in this first episode, and his ability to grieve but then kind of focus on helping Nezuko, like first getting her to the town to get her to a doctor, and then realizing that she's a demon and trying to keep her, with the human brain. And then at the end, as they're running towards where Giyu told him to go, I can't even imagine, because if I got home to my entire family slaughtered, I think I would not be able to function for about 2 months. So really shows how good of a guy he is.
Right. And it is just cruel. It's like this painted portrait of the beautiful, happy family like albeit a little bit impoverished, you know, like only selling charcoal as their main source of sustenance. And I'm always just struck by the moment where he does make it back up in the morning, and it's like the stop, and he's like, it's the smell, like it's just the smell of the blood.
Yeah.
And like the realization, and I agree that he handled it, I think, the best that he possibly could, but you have to wonder how much of that was like that like fight and flight instinct just kind of kicking in, just like jumping into action without even really understanding, and you know, not even really getting a chance to process, I think, that grief before getting just jumping into action and trying to help his sister, like you said.
Right. And you wonder how different the circumstance could have been if like he hadn't realized that Nezuko was still warm and that he could possibly save her. If it was just the entire family, obviously the story would be incredibly different, but we all grieve differently and we all have like those experiences. I don't think any of us can say that we've had this exact experience, hopefully, but you know, we all have that moment where something horrible happens, your heart drops, you know, you hear news of a family member passing or something like that, and we all do something different. And I thought the way he did it, like he still had that moment of shock and grief, but he chose to, you know, care for his sister and do what was right for her, which I thought was really valiant of him in such a cruel episode.
I think really part of Tanjiro's grieving process, I think it's really not over yet. And I think that's kind of part of, I guess, the longevity of the series, right? The Demon Slayer, right? The guy who's going to relieve his own grief by ending demons. And so I think that's kind of the cool part too, is like, as we talk about this cruel moment in his life and how long-term it affects him, I think really this has shifted his entire like life trajectory. And now it really has brought him kind of to a new emotional resolve with all of these events happening at the same time, which I think really just makes for a solid main character right out the gate. When you have emotional resolve, you have a likable character, and you have that really attaching moment to the audience as well.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention at the very beginning. it's tough.
And you have like, of course, this grief that we've already talked about in detail, like the grieving of the family, the grieving of the life that he would have had before the beginning of this episode. Imagine the grief also then, and the cruelty in realizing that the world is not what you perceived, not only in that it just is cruel and unforgiving, and you could have the things that you love snatched from you at a moment's notice, but this is also his first brush with the supernatural as well. And his instinct is like, what was this, a bear? You know, what happened to possibly have caused this? And then you have Giyu come in and explain like, no, like your family was slaughtered by a demon. It's like, what are you talking about? Demons aren't real. This was just something that the old man warned me about at the base of the mountain. So, you know, to lose your grip on your family, but then also on the reality that you've had as you've perceived it, and realize that you're fighting something that's not even human at this point. Like, is revenge even possible? Well, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And it's what makes Tanjiro such a great character too, is that he has this resolve and he has this kindness, but he also is very like foreshadowing to a few episodes ahead of this, but he is very unforgiving towards the demon that did it to his family. You know, he stands his ground and he's like, I will never forgive you. I will take you down. And I think that it makes him very realistic too, when he's so kind, but he also has that side of him that's very like, you did this to me and I am going to get back at you for it when I'm ready, when I can do it. And it's just, it tells so much about his character. Again, I could talk about him all day long. So. How much I love him.
He's the best boy.
You can make a podcast about it.
I could do a whole podcast just about Tanjiro. I'm gonna do my own thing now. It's gonna be called the Tanjiro podcast. I'm kidding.
I think one of the sad things like that happened right before we all realized they're dying, or like before like Tanjiro got back up the mountain, was Shigeru like trying to chop the rest of the wood while Tanjiro was gone. That just like made me just a little bit extra sad. I was like, he's like, I'm gonna get it back, or I'm gonna get it done all before Tanjiro gets back, and I was like, oh no.
Also, when he says like, his mom is trying to get him to not go, and he says that he wants everyone to eat their fill on New Year's. And like, they're not going to be around at New Year's. It's when you watch it a fourth time, you just want it to change. You don't want that to happen to him, but it does. It has to.
One other thing I wanted to talk about was kind of how Nezuko's or how like resilience kind of stands in this episode with like kind of continuing forward, right? When you see Tanjiro with Giyu trying to actually go forward from there and trying to like process what's going on, how Nezuko and Tanjiro kind of work in tandem with their own resolve. Like when Tanjiro fails, Nezuko's there to bring him up. And I feel like that sibling dynamic is also really attractive to the audience, but also really a powerful move for them too, to try and close their group together.
Yeah, I know we're the Hashira half hour, but of course the English translation being pillars, and I think that those two are really able to stand resolute as pillars for one another. For Tanjiro, it's like his last remaining drive, his last family member, his reason to keep going, and you know, his motivation, I think, for kicking off this hero's journey is like to get Nezuko back to her human form. For Nezuko, and I think that she doesn't get enough credit as really being like the other half of the main character, because she is. It's kind of difficult when you don't get a chance to speak a whole lot, but for her, it's got to be Tanjiro, because like she doesn't really have any other ties either. She's not really a demon. She's not really a human. She's somewhere in that liminal space between. And so that's the thing I think that she can have a firm grasp on, you know, to keep her reality in check as well.
Absolutely. They are down to each other. That's all they have left, really. And that's so sad. You know, they're at the very beginning, they are 13 and 12, and they now have come into the situation where they only have each other, and they really choose, as you use the word pillar, they are each other's pillar. Without the other, you know, you have no idea what would happen, because they're always there to back each other up. They're always there to protect each other. And it's just such a special relationship that unfolds throughout the show. I'm so excited to dive more into that, because sibling relationships are some of the most special things. I know so many siblings that are always on each other's nerves, and I know so many siblings that love each other an incredible amount. And I always love it when you have this like protection type relationship where the siblings would do anything to protect each other. And I feel like so many times in real life, we don't feel like that. We're just like, you're annoying, you're my little sister, like get out of my hair, you're just annoying me, as I apparently did with my older sisters because I am the youngest. So it's really refreshing just to see these two siblings that rely so much on each other just be there, no questions asked. It's the best. I love them.
Yeah, I know, they're so sweet. And it's interesting that you mentioned like the birth order a little bit, because I think that they were the two oldest. I want to say that they were like Tanjiro's the oldest, and then Nezuko was like the second oldest. And like in that, and like with the, you know, the passing of their father, knowing that their mother was single, it seemed like they really had to like step into those roles a little bit to help like with the younger ones, or like Tanjiro kind of taking on like the man of the household duties. And so I would imagine that that has to really contribute to their like immediate sense of resolve, and like, okay, like this is the terrible card that we've been dealt, but like, how can we move forward from here? What can we do? Let's get you turned back into a human. Let's kick off this hero's journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. Do you have anything else to add to the episode conversation before we dive into our favorite episodes? No? Okay, cool. Well, with that, we are going to transition into the second half of our episode. Every week, we are going to pinpoint our favorite part of the episode. And there's really no boundaries on what it can be. It can be your favorite character moment. It can be a voice acting moment, which, disclaimer, I believe all three of us watch this subbed. So if anyone on here, if anyone is listening in, we don't really watch it dubbed. I don't want to say we're snobs, you know, like the sub snobs. However, I'm just not a huge fan of dubs. So if we ever mention voice acting, we're usually referring to the Japanese voice acting. But it can be anything like that, or just a moment, scenery, animation, anything. So with that being said, I'll go first with my personal favorite moment, and it was Giyu. That's it. That's the tweet. Giyu. I love him. I'm kidding. Although Giyu was my favorite moment, that interaction and that introduction of that character was a very interesting moment for me. What I really loved was the moment where Tanjiro was on his knees begging and crying to not kill Nezuko. And he's yelling at him. Like, Giyu is full on like saying, "Don't do that. Why didn't you swing your axe?" And you have this brief moment where you're like, this guy's a jerk. Like, this kid just lost everything. And
Exactly
you're like, what is he
thought.
doing? Right? Like, at first I didn't like him, but then we wait 2 minutes and we see inside his thoughts. We hear him talking to himself, and we actually are seeing that he has this weird way of showing it, but he has empathy towards Tanjiro. He's telling him, like, don't cry. I know you want to scream. I know your family got slaughtered. We see that he feels guilty because he didn't get there in time to protect his family. And you just kind of see that Giyu already has like two sides to the coin. He's got this tough exterior, but maybe he's a teddy bear on the inside. Maybe, we'll see. But I just love the way that he was introduced in that way. And Giyu is my second favorite character. I will talk about him a lot as well. I adore him. Problem is, when I really fell in love is when we get into the manga part, which we're not going to talk about during the podcast until that stuff is out, so that we don't spoil anyone, especially Brian. But the way he was introduced, he just felt like he needed to be tough on Tanjiro to get him to join the Corps, and it worked. And he was surprised, and he was super, super cool, and I love him. Oh man! All right, Emily.
Oh gosh, it's just such a strong first episode. It's got like everything you could possibly want. It's got the bloodbath, it's got the call to action, it's got the really cool mysterious character that you just mentioned coming in and like admonishing, you know, our main character's weakness, kickstarting them on that journey to begin that hero's arc that they have. But my favorite, and I already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it really is like the foreshadowing with the older man in the cabin. I think I always look for like similarities in other stories that I've read in the media that I consume. And so one of my favorite books that I've ever read is Dracula. I really think that it like just hits on everything you could possibly want again in one of those Gothic stories. And I love the way that it's told from varying perspectives. Now, that's not something that Demon Slayer does necessarily, but there's a very similar moment in the beginning of both of these stories. And so in Dracula, Jonathan Harker's our main character, and he is kind of like on this journey to make it to the castle, right? Like that's how it begins. And he's trying to, kind of go into Dracula's lair unknowingly to him. And all the townspeople are like trying to warn him not to go. They're like, don't you know what today is? Like, there's nothing good this way. They're like giving him rosaries. They're like, there's nothing that you would possibly want about this journey. But he's also not totally familiar with their tongue. And so he kind of just brushes it off. And he's like, I've got things I need to do, places I need to be. And I'm going. And Tanjiro's story is similar, but it's a little bit different in that he actually does heed the warning of the older man and he does stay. And that probably prevented his doom as well. Because if he had gone up the mountain, there would be no Demon Slayer story to speak of. There might not have been any survivors.
Yeah.
Or, would maybe he have been the one that would have been on the cusp of death like Nezuko was, but with nobody to save him? Would he have become a full-fledged demon at that point? I think that all of that is really interesting, and how taking the advice of one older person who's a little bit nervous and is trying to warn you about the forest and that liminal space, it could change the entire lifespan of this character and their hero's arc. So that was my favorite part because of other things that I've read.
Demon Slayer what if right there, right? Like,
yeah.
What if, I feel like Tanjiro as a demon would have been terrifying.
Absolutely. Terrifying. Although he could have just been like super adorable like Nezuko. And what if she was the Slayer? I see so many like what ifs where Nezuko is the human and the Slayer and Tanjiro is the demon, which obviously would just mean they'd have to switch the story to be from her point of view at the beginning, and she's the one who goes and sells the coal. But that would be an interesting thought. And all the artwork that I see, Tanjiro is freaking adorable, just like Nezuko. So
Right. And there are so many what ifs, but it is interesting. Like if he had gone back up the mountain, would anyone have survived?
Mhm.
If they had, what would that have looked like? Because I think, again, going back to that point about them being one another's pillars, they needed each other to make it out of there alive. And I don't know how likely it is that without either one of them being exactly at the right place at the right time, that would have happened. So that's my favorite moment.
Absolutely. Brian?
Oof, there's a lot of good moments. I feel like we've really like given this episode like the praise it deserves, but I do think it's Nezuko coming to Tanjiro's rescue during that brief encounter with Giyu, right? After he throws his axe and falls. So, you know, Tanjiro, first off, part of this moment is Tanjiro surprising Giyu with his axe, right? Being able to blindside him completely, throw the rock as that fake, and then actually throw the axe behind it. And he's like, damn, I almost just got murdered. Like, I thought I was going to get this guy at Max and the demon. Little did I know I came close to my own demise. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then, kind of like I said earlier, Nezuko coming to Tanjiro when he's down and defenseless and standing up for him against Giyu. And I think that's really the important moment. And I think that's kind of I guess the tip of the iceberg right there is where you see Nezuko and Tanjiro go forward because Giyu evaluates Nezuko as not a threatening demon anymore, but as a demon who maybe has the chance to change. And I think that's the really cool part is that emotional empathy that Giyu may have as a teddy bear to be like, hey, maybe this one can do it. Maybe these two are special. And so I think that was really a personal favorite moment, but also part of the animation, I do always just kind of like think back to Giyu's face when we see he realized the axe above his forehead. And it just kind of boggles my mind. He was just like,
full on surprised him. Giyu, the like calm, collected at all times, like full on surprised.
Yeah, because he's sitting there thinking like this guy is just an emotional wreck, and like rightfully so. He's saying, of course you're devastated, like your whole family was just wiped out, and I am feeling bad too, because if I'd been here like 6 hours earlier, could I have stopped this from happening? And so like his brain is in that mind space, and that moment with the rock is so good. It's just like this is somebody who's going through all of that trauma but is still able to formulate a plan of attack that does surprise him, like you said. So good.
Yeah, it was Tanjiro's ability to surprise Giyu with his attack, being, you know, very smart about it, and then Nezuko's choice to protect him. That is really what gets the ball rolling when Giyu was like, all right, like these siblings could be different. They could be what we need to, you know, change the course of what's happening in the world right now. And it's such a great moment. I think all of us called to that and part of our favorite part of the episode. So it's a pretty good moment.
right?
It's such a good stuff. Such a good stuff. Words are hard. I'm just gonna roll with it. Such a good stuff. That's gonna be my thing now.
Tagline.
Many good stuff.
Many good stuff. Good soup.
Not the good soup.
Oh my gosh. Hello, early 2022 TikTok. Throwback. All right. Well,
just like a question. Do we see any of Giyu's animation in the first episode with his like water breathing?
No, I don't think he uses it.
No, not yet. But we do see how quick he can move because he has Nezuko with him, like under his blade in an instant. It's like, even Tanjiro's like, where did he go?
We also see him leave, where it's literally like he just, it's almost like he disapparates. Like we're suddenly in the world of Harry Potter. He just is like gone. So we can kind of see that this guy is really good. And we don't even see the breathing form yet. I don't think we see water breathing until final selection.
Yeah, like, and I think that's kind of the cool part about Demon Slayer 2 is that like you also get a hint of like what the heroes can look like from the very beginning. And I feel like in a lot of other like animes or shows, maybe like Castlevania, if you will, like you only see a lot of villains for like the first few episodes, or even like Avatar, you really don't get to see like the heroes of what they can be with the Water Tribe and the Fire Nation instance where Aang's finally out of the ice. So I think that's kind of nice is because you can attach yourself to something to look forward to as like a first time watcher for something long term possibly.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
that viewers would be like very curious to see who is this villain, because that is something that the episode does not touch on right away. We know that there is one, but we don't know who they are or what they want quite yet at this point. Like, is it something that's calculated? Is it just like a random bloodthirsty attack? I think that alone, the curiosity of that is enough to keep people watching.
Yeah, as of right now, the only villain is a demon. It's just we know that demons exist now and that they slaughtered Tanjiro's family, and we got to slay them. That's the call to action. It's a call to action. I love it. All right. Well, it does look like we're about out of time. So thank you all for joining us today for our first Hashira half hour. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and you can follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at Hashira Half Hour. Umai!
My.
Umai.
Oh no, is that going to be our ending now?
Oh, God.
Oh,